Order. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for our 35th and what will be our last meeting of not only this study, but this session. And I want to repeat some of the remarks I made at the conclusion of the last meeting, and that is to thank everybody for their hard work, their commitment, their spirit of cooperation, and enthusiasm for this study, but not just this study, but for the committee. And again, particular thanks to all of the people who make this meeting work every week twice. The translators are, of course, our wonderful clerk and our amazing analysts. So thank you all again. And thank you to our witnesses today for joining us on what is our 35th meeting, but our last meeting on the study of low carbon and renewable fuels. We're doing this virtually. I'm sure all of you have done this before. You have headsets. I ask you to be patient, wait till the other person is finished speaking so the translators can pick up the communication back and forth. There's a translation button at the bottom of your screen, which you can use. You will be asked questions in both official languages. You're welcome and encouraged to use both yourself. And what I will do is give every witness group up to 5 minutes to deliver opening remarks, and then we'll open the floor to committee members to pose questions. I may have to interrupt from time to time if people go over their time limits, and I will apologize in advance for that. But again, thank you for coming. So we have 4 groups of witnesses today. We have Advanced Biofuels Canada, Air Liquide Canada, Inc., Dr. Ross McKittrick from the University of Guelph, and Renewable Industries Canada. I will let you speak in that order. So why don't I start with Advanced Biofuels Canada, and I welcome Mr. Ian Thompson and Fred Gatala. And I have overlooked the fact that Mr. Saray is not here today, and he has been kindly replaced by Ms. Martinez Ferrada. So thank you for joining us today as well. So, all right, over to Advanced Biofuels. You have the floor for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Ian Thompson, and as stated previously, the President of Advanced Biofuels Canada. I'm joined here by my colleague, Fred Gatala, the Director of Carbon and Sustainability for our organization. I wish to convey this morning 2 core ideas relative to the committee's study. The first is that the advanced biofuels and renewable synthetic fuels made by our members have improved dramatically on all fronts in the past decade and are being deployed at commercial scale here and around the world. Yet the revolutionary nature of these innovations is not widely known, and old perceptions prevail across the world. My second message is that the Clean Fuel Regulation, or CFR, currently under review, has immense potential but needs several straightforward amendments to deliver on its promise. Renewable fuel regulations of a decade ago had only a handful of solutions, but these regulations worked as intended. They kickstarted widespread efforts to deploy a new generation of low carbon, energy dense fuels. Today, these fuels can be 100% substitutes for or blended with fossil fuels, fully functional in existing engines and infrastructures, and some are indeed produced at existing petroleum refineries. Clean fuel feedstocks have expanded beyond sustainable crops to include household and industrial wastes and residues, and even CO2 captured from air or from industrial flue stacks. Clean liquid fuels complement an array of other low carbon transportation energies now also being scaled up. The result of these innovations is that advanced biofuels made today in Canada can be carbon competitive to, for instance, electric vehicles on a full life cycle basis. A vehicle running on these fuels can be a zero emission vehicle, reducing greenhouse gases from 80 to 120% below those of fossil. We know that electricity and other low carbon energies will have a rapidly growing role in transportation. But the IEA's sobering report of last month starkly noted that even under fully executed ambitious global net zero pledges, by 2050, more than 80% of final energy demand in transportation can rely on the internal combustion engine. Marine, rail, and aviation sectors may be reliant on those fuels even longer. In short, we really can't wait to 2030 or 2050 without the rapid scale of these liquid fuels. The new clean fuel regulations can play a key role in Canada's net zero future, and we have 2 recommendations relative to its design. Our first addresses an inescapable fact: 75% of vehicle greenhouse gas emissions are from the crude oil in fuel combustion. The other 25% is from the energy that goes into extracting and refining fuels. In plain terms, the CFR will fail to get Canada on the path to net zero unless it addresses proportionately these combustion emissions. The only solutions capable of delivering zero combustion emissions are advanced biofuels, renewable electricity, low carbon hydrogen, renewable natural gas, and biocrude for refineries. Put another way, you can't capture and store a car's tailpipe exhaust. Unfortunately, the CFR draft design offers many incentives for fuel suppliers to focus their actions on reducing upstream emissions that will never be able to take us more than 25% of the way to net zero. In addition, other provisions will award credits for activity that have nothing to do with liquid fuels or transportation. And I would be happy to describe a straightforward solution to this misalignment, but roughly it follows the precedent set by the Clean Fuel Regs. Our second recommendation relates to CFR feedstock criteria and the new greenhouse gas measurement tool. Canada's providers of sustainable crops, agricultural and forestry residues, and waste resources are concerned about market access requirements and seek clarity on carbon intensity scoring under the new LCA tool. The practical solution is to align the life cycle assessment model and feedstock criteria with established industry standards in the North American fuel trade and to adopt them with an orderly transition. Clarity on how Canada's farmers, foresters, and clean fuel producers can participate will support new investments. Our recent analysis indicates that a well-designed CFR can create over 20,000 new jobs and add $10 billion in new economic output. Lastly, I'd like to add that several of the clean energy tax measures and funding programs in the Strength and Climate Plan and Budget 2021 need refinement to create competitive conditions for private sector investments. In closing, let me reflect again that Canada's advanced biofuel sector is helping drive Canada's economic recovery and underpin climate plans. Our task is clear: to decarbonize the internal combustion engine. We appreciate your work on low carbon fuels and the invitation to meet today. My colleague and I look forward to your questions. Merci aux membres du comité.
Thank you to committee members.
Next up we have from Air Liquide Canada Inc., Mr. Bertrand Masselot, President and CEO. Sir, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, thank you for giving us the opportunity to present you with our vision and how we intend to contribute to the energy transition, especially in a fuel transition. Now, we are a 100-year-old organization. We have we're in many countries and have many employees, and we're working with very small molecules. And we're using these projects for our clients in a safe way in the long term. And the objective is to improve the process, to produce faster, better, more efficiently, and to move around with the lowest carbon footprint possible, and to improve people's quality of life and that of our patients. Now, we have been around since 1911 in Canada, and from the East and West Coast, we've got 4 pillars. We've got a primary production pillar with current infrastructure, and then we have a pillar that works with major industrial activities. This goes from small to medium-sized activities, and in the area of mobility, especially for captive fleets. These are for various things that use batteries. And so this is in the industrial sector where we work with, for example, welders, and in the health sector. Now for Air Liquide, we want to reach carbon neutrality in 2050. It's not easy to do this because we have a structure and that exists and it wants to do this, but for historical reasons, it's very energy intensive. So we're working with our clients to improve their processes. There are common projects underway, and recently we have demonstrated a clear interest in contributing to the creation of a new ecosystem. Now, hydrogen, this is a strong pillar. We want to create value, but we want to create this within a low-carbon society. Now, for hydrogen molecules, they are small, they're efficient, they're easy to stock and use. Now, in terms of fuel, We want to create something that can be used within the context of decarbonization of our society, and in particular, everything that has to do with transportation, including heavy industry, heavy transportation. Now, as for our group Air Liquide, we want to invest in the 8 billion euros in the next decade. Now, this is we're talking 3 gigawatts of energy, and this is throughout the world, of course. And for us, this is a very important point, and we'll probably come back to it, the importance of working by basin. What characterizes our group is that we are present in terms of investors and technology at all stages of the value chain for hydrogen, primary production, transportation, whether that's canalizations or liquid form or compressed form, implementation at the point of use, stations for fuel fill up, for example. We put our practices in place, and we want to scale up. So it's very important to grow all the size of these facilities. The objective is simple. Whether it's to decarbonize industry or mobility, we believe that it is key to increase the size of these facilities to bring down significantly the cost of investment in these facilities along the entire value chain, and even more so in the end, we want to make sure that in the immediate future or through a number of supports, with the help of a number of partners, whether that's from industry or private sector or authorities and end user clients, we want to move towards a world that is low in carbon and with a hydrogen price, because that's what we're talking about today, that at the point of use is as low as possible so that we can position ourselves best compared to other uses, especially fossil fuels. So before concluding, I would say that we are convinced that in this case we are able to bring down the price of hydrogen by 60% over the next decade. And one of the best things we've done, and you probably already heard about this, is excuse me. Excuse me, there's an alarm in the background that's bothered me. So in Bécancour, 20 megawatts, that's about 8 tons of hydrogen. And this started up last year, and currently it helps industry and mobility sectors in Canada and the northeast of the U.S. Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have Dr. Ross McKittrick, Professor of Economics, University of Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I appreciate the chance to speak to you today. I hold a PhD in economics from the University of British Columbia, where I specialized in natural resource and environmental economics. At the University of Guelph, I have for 25 years taught courses in environmental economics and policy, econometrics, and microeconomic analysis. Canada is a world leader in finding ways to protect the environment while maintaining growth in economic opportunities and living standards. I hope that the information learned through your hearings will assist your committee as you aim to continue doing so. While most of my research is aimed at peer-reviewed academic publications, I have also written extensively in the public domain, including think tank reports and media op-eds. Anyone familiar with my writings will know that I have certain biases, which I can summarize very simply. I believe that policies should be critically analyzed to ensure the benefits exceed the costs. Not every environmental goal is sufficiently valuable to be worth the cost of achieving it. And when a goal has been chosen, it is incumbent on policymakers to try to achieve it at the lowest possible cost. The disaster regarding Ontario's electricity restructuring is a cautionary tale of what happens to an economy when this lesson is ignored. I have done research for the Macdonald-Laurier Institute on the costs and benefits of Canadian biofuels policy. I'm referring to work with my colleague Doug Auld in 2014. For LFX Associates on the costs of the proposed clean fuel standards, that was published last year, and for the Fraser Institute, published earlier this year as part of a study on the costs of the proposed carbon tax in Canada. The biofuels report I co-authored with my colleague, Professor Doug Auld at the University of Guelph, showed that over the 2008 to 2012 interval, Canadians paid about $3 in costs for every $1 in environmental benefits attained through biofuels. In arriving at this conclusion, we made assumptions as favorable as possible to the biofuels case. But the expert literature has shown that switching to corn ethanol does not necessarily lower greenhouse gas emissions on a life cycle basis compared to using gasoline. The rapid expansion of the biofuels sector after 2006 was driven by government support programs, not by the underlying economics. My research for the Fraser Institute showed that the costs of blending ethanol goes up in a convex fashion, meaning the costs go up non-linearly as the carbon intensity target gets lower. Because ethanol has less energy per liter than gasoline, consumers have to fill up the tank more often to go the same distance. Based on elasticity estimates in the economics literature and parameter values from other published sources, and there I relied chiefly on the Canadian Energy Research Institute in Calgary, I estimate that a 5% cut in carbon intensity below the current baseline will increase the cost of gasoline on a per kilometer basis by about 17%, while a 10% cut will increase it by 48%, and a 20% cut will increase it by 156%. My work for LFX Associates involved macroeconomic modeling of the proposed clean fuel standard. We modeled a policy package that would achieve 30 megaton greenhouse gas emission reduction, and we estimated that even using a relatively high social cost of carbon metric, which in other words, assigning benefits at the high end of the range, the policy would cost the Canadian economy $6 for every $1 in environmental benefits, with net costs averaging $440 per employed person per year. We also estimated it would cause a permanent loss of 30,000 jobs nationally, even after taking account of expanded employment in the biofuels sector, and would put $22 billion in capital at risk of exiting the domestic economy. We also noted that in the context of population and income growth, the total emission reductions would be offset by a 7% increase in the size of the labor force, meaning the actual emission reductions as of 2030 would be far smaller than 30 megatons and would likely be zero or less. I also note that a larger problem with climate policy generally is that emission reductions in Canada often lead to carbon leakage, in which the emitting activity does not disappear, it simply moves to China or India or other competitive countries, taking the jobs with it. The common catchphrase about the costs of climate inaction leads to a muddled argument.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, Dr. McKittrick.
Last sentence. The relevant comparison is between global carbon emissions with the policy and without. And if they are about the same, costs we incur are largely for naught. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I jumped the gun there too soon. Appreciate that. Okay, on to Renewable Industries Canada. We have Malcolm West, Board Member, Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer at Greenfield Global, and Scott Lewis, Board Member, Executive Vice President, Commercial Operations and Strategy at World Energy. I don't know who is going to do the presentation, but you have the floor.
Malcolm?
Mr. West, you look like you're trying, but maybe your sound's not on. Can you hear
Malcolm?
us, Mr. West? Okay, because we can't hear you.
Mute, bottom left.
Are you able to step in, Mr. Lewis?
I think I can, yes.
Okay, all right, I'll give you the floor then.
So excuse me if I read Malcolm's as well on his behalf, just to get it going. On behalf of Renewable Industries Canada, I would like to thank the chair and distinguished committee members for the invitation to present as a part of your study of renewable fuels. In addition, I'm speaking on behalf of Malcolm, to my role at RI Canada, I am Executive Vice President, CFO of Greenfield Global, Canada's largest ethanol producer. RI Canada members produce more liters of renewable fuel here, right here in Canada, than in any other organization. As Canada moves towards implementing its own net zero by 2050 objectives, one sector is often top of mind. The transportation industry is too massive to slow down, but too impactful on the environment to ignore. Members of our association have found a way to thread the needle through innovative, modern biofuels. We continue to develop increasingly efficient biofuels that meet or exceed net zero emissions on a life cycle basis. Over the past 35 years, our technology has substantially reduced transportation's carbon footprint. A key focus of this committee study should be the need to implement affordable, market-ready technologies to achieve climate objectives. The value proposition offered by biofuels is incontrovertible. Ethanol is typically cheaper than gasoline, acts as an octane enhancer, promoting vehicle performance, burns more efficiently, and can be used with existing infrastructure. Existing technologies, including the use of biogas to replace natural gas in ethanol production, carbon capture and sequestration, and enhanced farming practices can make ethanol a net zero fuel, or even net beneficial for the environment. All cars on the road as of 2001 can use ethanol blends of at least 15%, with others comparable with levels in the 25 to 85% range. These flex fuel vehicles cost roughly the same as regular fossil fuel burning cars and represent the most affordable way for consumers to reduce emissions from their commute. Policy that favors modern biofuels also stimulates new R&D. At Greenfield Global, for example, we recently invested in a joint venture that uses anaerobic digestion of solid municipal waste to create biogas for our ethanol plant in Varennes, Quebec. Next steps include producing green hydrogen to meet increased renewable fuel demand. So far, I've spoken to you mostly about light-duty transportation and renewable gaseous fuels. I will now pass the microphone to my colleague Scott Lewis to talk about the heavy duty and aviation sectors. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I would like to echo Malcolm's words of appreciation for this important opportunity to discuss renewable fuels together. As EVP of Commercial Operations and Strategy at World Energy, a global leader in the production of biomass-based diesel and sustainable aviation fuels. Some may worry that Canada's climate goals are too ambitious, while others may want the government to move faster. I'm here to tell you that net zero is real and possible. Today, right here in Ontario, my company produces a biodiesel that exceeds net zero standards, as measured by the Government of Canada's life cycle analysis model. We're able to do this by taking waste, such as used cooking oils from restaurants and animal fats from rendering plants, and transform them into biomass-based diesel. We also have the technology right now to make renewable diesel using other ingredients that would meet net zero requirements as well. You don't need to turn over the existing fleets of heavy-duty diesel trucks, buses, and trains. The renewable diesel that RI Canada members make is already 100% compatible. The same goes for diesel generators in northern and remote communities. They can all produce low carbon power tomorrow, simply by putting in the right fuel. Advanced biofuels are a here and now solution to significantly reduce carbon emissions. Sustainable aviation fuel is another example of instant decarbonization. Right now, global demand for sustainable aviation fuel is off the charts, but supply is low because we do not have the right policies in place. Our renewable fuels are proven to be compatible with existing air fleets and are currently being used by many airlines, including United, KLM, and Alaska, to name just a few. As we aim to build back better coming out of the pandemic, Canada needs to ensure that sustainable aviation fuel is leveraged to attain important GHG reductions. Ultimately, this kind of policy will stimulate investment and grow the Canadian economy. Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present to the committee. It will be a pleasure for Malcolm and I to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. I appreciate both of you. Okay, so now we'll go on to our first round of questions for 6 minutes each, starting with Mr. McLean.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses here, because we're building on some blocks here. It's our last meeting, but we've heard a lot from a bunch of witnesses, some of which is quite contradictory, but conflicting input on Canada and the world's ability to replace our energy system with either biofuels or hydrogen. And I appreciate most of the biofuels part of it here. The pathways for each transition seem daunting given the complete uncertainty that we've been presented here. The bigger concern, of course, is this transition will actually result in GHG emissions, or are we just looking to subsidize industries that don't add environmental value in the energy equation? So my first question goes to Mr. Thompson at Advanced Biofuels Canada. When you talk about decarbonizing the internal combustion engine, which I think is a laudable goal, but we heard from Mark Wallenitz of Navius Research at the last meeting. He advised us to be careful about using new bio feedstock for biofuels production because of the inherent depletion of soil carbon stocks and the obvious release of this carbon to the atmosphere. Can you comment on that, please?
I can. Thanks for the question. Well, I can point to Canada. The data in Canada indicate that over the last 20 years, soil organic carbon in the agricultural regions that have produced biofuel feedstocks have increased substantially. So Canadian soils have become a net sink, if you will, for carbon sequestration. As a result, the carbon intensity reduction potential of biofuels produced off those have declined substantially. Competent regulatory authorities supported by their scientists with deep LCA knowledge have examined all aspects of the biofuel supply chain, which the committee knows go all the way from all of the crop inputs or forestry inputs or waste or whatever the inputs, and go all the way through the tailpipe combustions. That's how we measure LCA. The science 10 years ago on some of the other aspects was less well known because these kinds of regulations have been promulgated so far and wide. There's an immense amount of work going into it. And
Mr. Thomas, sorry, I'm limited in time here, so let me push further. But the EPA has a study here, and we've talked about 30 different studies that talk about the actual CO2 emissions from biofuels being about double what they replace when you put them in life cycle wise from an internal combustion engine. So, and the latest one, of course, from the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, indicating that sinks are it's a contentious way of looking at this, I think, more than anything else. But let me ask my next question in this regard to Mr. McKittrick. We've got a few witnesses here that indicated to us, Mr. Jacquard being one of them from the University of Victoria, famously told us, as you can appreciate, it's the policy you need and don't worry so much about the outcome, which I don't agree with. You can comment on that. But he told us that he's reviewed 20 to 30 studies that show that biofuels produce more GHGs than the product they replace, but they are wrong, according to him, because they don't use his own dynamic analysis, they use static analysis. Can you please comment, Mr. McKittrick?
Well, I didn't hear Professor Jacquard's presentation, so I can't comment on the specific studies. Some of the issue depends on where you get the fuels. If they're imported from the United States, they're being produced with the American electricity system, which is much more carbon intensive than the Ontario electricity system. Another issue is the scale. It's possible to do things on a small experimental scale with very favorable parameters, but if you then need to scale it up to an economy level operation, then you do need to pay attention very carefully to those studies because they're going to be indications of what lies ahead. I think that Professor Jacquard tends to be very optimistic about technological change in the way that he models it, that it's induced by policy changes. That's a controversial idea in economics, that policymakers can induce favorable favorable technological changes. It doesn't always work out. But I would say that there's always a chance. There's always a chance that we're on the cusp of very favorable changes in technology. If we are, the carbon tax alone will get it. You don't need to add to the carbon tax mandates to force industries to change what they're doing. The carbon tax puts a price on the emissions that will cause
Good.
players
Mr.
in the
McKittrick,
industry.
I need to move on. Sorry, I've only got a short period of time here left. And I'll ask you the follow-on question here. Don O'Connor was here last time from S&T Squared Consultants, and he talked about not including the emissions associated with the capital build in these energy transitions for life cycle analysis. Contradictorily, he did acknowledge that reductions immediately was more important than eventual emissions. How do you view capital costs of biofuels production in the life cycle analysis of these carbon emissions?
I presume that those are taken into account, although, again, it depends if you are building the whole industry here in Canada versus if you are just importing them from the US, in which case the capacity may already be in place. Again, though, I think pushing the life cycle analysis back into the actual capital builds gets into somewhat speculative parameters. So you'd need to look in detail at
okay. Final question on.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. You're right on the button there. Actually.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. Over to you for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can hear me well? Okay.
Perfectly.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, thank you again to all the great witnesses that we have today. A very interesting testimony today with respect to biofuels, and we're hearing from the one side of the ledger saying biofuels should be part of the future, and advanced biofuels will help certainly reach our climate targets. And then we hear Mr. Kittrick from the University of Guelph saying that, well, that's maybe a bit too hopeful. So maybe let's go to industry and maybe the market, which is, I think, Monsieur Masselot, Air Liquide. Vous avez dit que vous...
You said that you were making massive investments into decarbonization and that your goal is to have carbon neutrality in 2050. So why did you make those decisions if you are a for-profit business? So you must see profits at the end of the line. I'd like to hear you on that, please. On one end, people are saying, well, maybe things won't work out and it's not worth it. On the other hand, people are saying there's a huge economic portion to this and there's huge potential. Go ahead. Thank you. 2 points. First of all, is that we understand hydrogen, because that's what we're working on at Air Liquide. We're very interested in this molecule. We produce tens of millions of cubic liters per year. The reason we're investing for our own activities and for our clients, this is the question. We're not just trying to make profit. We want to see if we can create value in the long run. We are completely convinced that, well, in terms of for the society, but also as leaders, so when we talk in a more general sense, that creating value and sustainability is important for the social acceptability of our activities, even if they are energy intensive. And this explains why this movement is something we're engaging in now, and we've been doing this for some years now. And at the end of all of this, we think that we will be able to create value and also to do it in a sustainable and beneficial way.
With respect to, you talked about advanced biofuels and the potential that it has. I want to hear maybe, and you didn't really talk about this in your opening remarks, but the potential for exports. And what is the rest of the world doing in that sector? Are we the only ones doing this in Canada, or are there other players around the world? And is this a huge market opportunity for Canada and for Canadian companies? Mr. Thompson, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. There is an export opportunity. Absolutely. Canada is not going it alone on climate action. And we have, as most Canadians know, we are overweighted in our natural resource sector capacity to population. So we're a natural for export. We export a lot of our energies, conventional energies, and the same is true for alternative energies. Full stop, I would say that our analysis says it's a very attractive market internationally. And today, Canada exports substantial amount of biofuels into places like California, the European Union.
Well, we heard from a witness here today that the cost doesn't outweigh the benefits. And what would you say to that?
I would only say that competent bodies such as Navius Research in British Columbia and others have studied that exhaustively with their expertise and found that to be not true. The Biofuels in Canada 2020 report that you can find on their website lays out by province the cost of using biofuels and renewable fuel regulations. And in the case of ethanol into gasoline, it creates a negative net cost for Canadians because of the octane value. And for renewable diesel type fuels, there's a slight cost to a typical long-haul trucker.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to hear Mr. Lewis or Mr. West on that same point, please. I think it's very important.
So it's Malcolm West. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
And apologies for the glitch earlier. I would echo Ian's comments that when it comes to ethanol, which is more the world at Greenfield Global versus renewable diesel, which is Scott's world. But on the ethanol side, typically at wholesale, ethanol is trading at a significant discount to gasoline, and as well, it comes with it the value, the high octane value, which saves costs as well. So overall, the use of ethanol, even taking into account its lower energy density, it's slightly lower energy density, it is cheaper than gasoline.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, I think that there's been a lot of talk here about the scale of putting this in and what the actual life cycle is. I'd like to refer to a project, a significant project, our largest one that we have in California right now, where we actually converted an existing and yet no longer viable petroleum refinery. So we bought a 63-acre parcel just about 10 miles east of Long Beach. It was a 100-year-old asphalt refinery. It started out as a crude refinery, and we're converting that, which would have been, we saved the jobs, we kept every single employee that was there, and are converting that into a 25,000 barrel per day renewable diesel and sustainable aviation refinery right now. We're operating right now at about 4,000 barrels a day, and by 2023 it'll be at 25,000 barrels a day, all using waste products, so recovered vegetable oils, used cooking oils, etc. So I think that in terms of the life cycle analysis of these, it's been pretty clearly established right now, and I think that we want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples with the data that is now available as opposed to data that was available 15 or 20 years ago. There's been significant advances in that, and we find that the demand for the product and our primary customers are obligated party oil and gas companies, and that's who we partner with. Both we have a joint venture with Shell, who is our neighbor in Hamilton, and we've been supplying them for over 10 years. We find that the oil and gas companies are the ones that are actually taking this on.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank you.
Lefebvre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, Mr. Simard, over to you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, James. I have a quick question for Mr. Maslow. Earlier in your presentation, you talked about 8 billion euros in investments around the world. Is that only for hydrogen? Yes, I can confirm that, yes, that's generic. So not just primary production, but from the production point up until the use point and its implementation. So that could be for transportation or for the industry. Excellent. So 8 billion in investment around the world in hydrogen production, transportation, and so on, and everything else that's involved in the value chain. I'm wondering about the regulations. Could you tell us a little more about this? Is regulation in Europe, if we go back to those famous color codes, green, blue, hydrogen, and so on, are the projects you're investing in, do they distinguish between those different types of hydrogen? The answer is yes. We can talk about various colors of hydrogen. We can generally say low carbon hydrogen because green hydrogen will always remain a similar molecule, and the different one will be higher in carbon. Now, today, when we look at the projects that we're investing in, there are projects that are based on electrolysis, And it doesn't make low carbon or green hydrogen. It's the electricity. If there's upstream electricity that allows to do it, then that's what it is. Or another possibility, and we're currently positioned to do this, we've already carried out projects like this, that's for the capture of CO2 or for a more classic hydrogen production. And it uses steam and natural gas. We've done sequestration in the past of CO2, and that involved natural gas. So the investment part is towards this low carbon hydrogen. And as I said, what we plan to do is to invest 3 gigawatts in electrolysis compared to the amount that's produced in Bécancour. Now, regulations in Europe, they allow you to produce hydrogen with a carbon capture strategy, meaning you can make hydrogen from natural gas, renewable natural gas, as long as there's a carbon capture plant. Is that right? Yes. Today, an industrial actor like Air Liquide is invested in all of these means of primary production. And I would even say that what will guide us is the environment, the energy environment, and the possibilities of the countries where we are. Canada and Quebec in particular, well, it's obvious that the abundance of renewable energy, of hydroelectricity, pushes us towards electrolysis. On the contrary, we're investing and we're starting up a unit that is dedicated to the mobility market in California. And that unit that's in Nevada it works with transforming of natural gas. We have our own technology for this type of unit, and that's for ethanol in particular. So a supplementary step would be CO2 sequestration, and then that would become net negative. Now, for the production cost, if you produce a hydrogen molecule in Canada, the production cost must be lower if you do it in Quebec using hydroelectricity than if you were to do it in the west part of Canada using renewable natural gas, where you would have to have a carbon capture strategy. Is that right? Go ahead. In general, yes. What we can say is that, and it's important to have alignment between the different actors, that is to say the authorities, political bodies. If we compare today the production cost for hydrogen that we would call gray from a standard scenario, and even in electrolysis, this is a high-end product. That's how it's presented, and that's why it'd be good to get bigger. That brings 3 things. That would bring down the cost of the investments massively, because there would be automation in the way that things are manufactured for electrolysis, and an increase in size would allow us per kilo or per ton of hydrogen to bring down the price. Today, there isn't one number for the competitiveness of hydrogen or another type of fuel. And now, for heavy transportation, we know we're going to have to go forward quickly. And the use that will be made of it, the intensity of use, the number of kilometers traveled, and so on. So, yes, we do work on geographic zones and inputs, how the hydrogen will be made. We've got prices that are not homogeneous. And a short, quick question. Are the strategies that you know for carbon capture? I read something on carbon being buried. Are your methods safe? The first thing is that sequestration, well, not us at Air Liquide, but with natural gas, that's been done for decades now. That's also done, well, at Air Liquide, we do this with hydrogen. We've got hydrogen networks. In the U.S. and Mexico, we've got caverns, as we call them, for stocking, and it's used for CO2 as a molecule that's quite stable. Now, in terms of efficiency, for the processes themselves for capture or sequestration, this is a technology that has existed for a few years now, and it's reliable. That's been demonstrated in 2019 in France. And the last thing is that when there is CO2, well, thank you very much.
All right, okay, Mr. Cannings, over to you.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to continue on with Monsieur Masselot from Air Liquide. And you know what? It's interesting to me with Air Liquide is that you have that capacity at every stage of the value chain. And a lot of what we've been talking about in this study is how do we scale up these processes to get the cleaner fuels in use across Canada and around the world. And I'm just wondering if you could perhaps expand on that scale up, especially, for instance, if we're going to use hydrogen for heavy transportation and other places where it seems to be best suited. What do we need to do? What are the important steps that you need to take in your company, and how can the government incentivize that or help that to get this scale up moving quickly, because we obviously have to do that. So what are the important steps? Are they hubs? What can the government do? Where can the government investments be best placed?
Thank you. To begin with, according to us, what is totally critical is to make sure that the investment we're going to do, scaled up, larger, will be based on what we could define as anchor customers. And no matter the anchor customer is a large industrial basin, is a captive fleet of trucks, I don't know in an airport, but what's important is based on a solid, reliable, relatively continuous need of hydrogen, and preferably low carbon hydrogen, to build the demand, justifying the setup of the primary production of hydrogen. That's the first step. Then it will be far easier in a second step to add multiple other type of use, including intermittent one. And when we're dealing with transportation, and notably passenger vehicles, if I take this example, it's very intermittent. So that's why, according to us, it's important to build the demand. And there, for sure, authorities, communities can help with their own fleets. Could be buses, could be ferries, could be trains. All those captive fleets have the interest of very often, if not always, coming back to their original location, meaning that it's limiting to a certain extent the importance of the investment in terms of overall supply chain, all the setup to be in a position to fuel vehicles. So that's the first point. The second important point is de-risking. I'm an industrial, I'm ready to take risk. That's why, by the way, I'm asking for a certain return. But nevertheless, we need a good level of policy alignment. We need to have strategies. We need to have an overall coordination. Same thing for regulation, ease of doing business, permitting, typically. At the same time, it's key for us and for all players, I'm sure, around the table to do it in a safe and sustainable way. And that's something we're doing for now, if you're speaking about hydrogen, 4 or 5 decades. So last but not least, incentive will help, as there's still, and it's known, an economical gap, and not neglectable, between volumes we need to eat, and it's the scaling up or the ramp up, where hydrogen or any other fuel, it's one, let's say, technical brick or parameter, will be at par with the historical way of fueling for fossil fuels or others. So in a nutshell, that would be my answer.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to Mr. Lewis and ask more or less the same thing about the scale up, if we have time. I don't know how much time I have, Mr. Chair.
You've got about 1.5 minutes.
Okay, good. Yeah, with biodiesel, it seems that it could be a quick way to change things so that we reduce the overall emissions. But, how closer we are to scaling up, or how difficult would it be to scale up in terms of having the feedstocks to, buy, where would we be by 2030? Can we do this by 2050 to convert all our diesel stocks to biodiesel? Because that's where we have to be by 2050.
Well, thank you very much for the question. I think that there is an immense opportunity to be able to expand. As I say, we're taking in California, we're taking this plant from 3,000 when we bought it, 3,000 barrels a day up to 25,000 barrels a day. We're looking to make additional investments. We can expand our plant in Hamilton, Ontario, that we have. And the reason why we can do that is because we have to have a way to have transparent trading credits that can establish this market here. So right now, the California market has a very strong and transparent trading economy on carbon reductions. And if we can establish that in Canada, through the clean fuel regulation, then that is going to attract investment, and we will be able to scale up, and we will be able to make significant advancements. Not to mention that we're constantly looking on every upgrade that we do to any plant. We assess it on a carbon basis as well. What is the most efficient way to do that? And so by generating more carbon reductions with every capital investment we make and every gallon that we produce, we can achieve that faster. So over the last 15 years that we've been producing, we have made investments which have made every gallon more valuable from a carbon reduction perspective, including upgrading the byproducts to replace petrochemicals and things like that allowed us to get past a net zero basis.
Thank you. Mr. Cannings.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving into the next round for 5 minutes each, starting with Mr. Zimmer.
Thank you to our chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Affordability is something that we've asked many times about. It has to be affordable for Canadians for them to pursue this. I think Dr. McKittrick brought up the disastrous policies in Ontario that led it to be the largest subnational debtor in the world. And it was because of their electric policy and subsidization and a bunch of other issues too related that really caused these problems to happen. So affordability. So Dr. McKittrick, concerned about the impacts in terms of affordability to our food costs. Can you just speak to that? Because you did talk about it driving up costs. Can you just speak to that effect?
Yeah, that's been a long-standing theme in the economics literature around ethanol and biofuels policy, that there's competition with the food supply. And the run-up in corn prices in the later part of the last decade was attributed to an expansion, especially in the United States, of the ethanol mandate. And we would expect to see the same kind of effect here in Canada. And so when you look at the cost of the biofuels policy, it's fair enough for industry to look at their own production costs and say, this is how much it costs for us to produce the ethanol. But from the economic analysis point of view, we also try to take into account all those second order effects in the economy, including, in this case, the increase in the price of food, because that's also borne by households.
So, Dr. McKittrick, again, following up on that, you talked about, you mentioned some really alarming numbers, and this is what we had been suspecting, and we've read on our side about its effectiveness, because certainly, we all want renewables, we all want to do what's better for the environment. But when you said some numbers where for every $3 spent, there's only $1 benefit. Then you later said for every $6 of cost, there's only $1 of benefit. That doesn't sound very effective to me. Can you just explain, how maybe those numbers?
So there's a lot more detail in my written submission. In the case of the evaluation of the 2008 to 2012 biofuels policy, we tabulate throughout the paper all the sources of those cost numbers, and then talk about what's the most optimistic estimate of the reduction of greenhouse gases that came about from the policy. In the case of, so that was the 3-to-1 ratio. In the second one, that was a macroeconomic model that looked at all the costs throughout the economy of this increase in fuel production costs. And so that number is larger because we're widening the scope of the analysis. I do want to say the technology does change over time, and it's the industry will be in the best position of saying this is what we could do in the future. But it's still incumbent on you as policymakers to do what Ontario did not do, which is test those assumptions. Is this really going to lower the cost of electricity the way you claim?
And I'll just get one more question in there, Dr. McKittrick, to you. And it comes, in order to make this effective, we can see 6 to 1 doesn't seem very effective to me, right? At this point, like you said, maybe in the future it will be. But this is a last question to you, being an economist. How do you make it effective? What needs to be done to make it effective? Like where we actually are seeing a dollar for dollar efficiency. I mean, it's interesting on this side to hear about all the complaints. I hear other members of the committee talk about incentivization or subsidization of this when they decry subsidizing oil and gas. And I would agree with them. I don't think we should be subsidizing oil and gas. But then in some respects, expected on the other side of that same coin. So maybe just to explain what can be done to make this an effective policy.
I can't address the engineering aspect, but from an economic point of view, our reasoning around environmental policy generally is you pick one instrument and let it do its work. So the government has chosen carbon pricing. And if carbon pricing works, and if these numbers are favorable for ethanol and biofuels, the market will make that switch. But if you think, well, we need a lot of mandates and rules in addition to carbon pricing, then in effect, you're saying you don't believe that those cost numbers on industry that industry is reporting are valid. I would say you pick your price of CO2 emissions you think is appropriate, and then let the market find the lowest cost way of achieving the emission reductions.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Weiler, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you all the witnesses for being here today. Lots of really interesting testimony. I'd like to ask my first question of Dr. McKittrick and continue on a line there. You mentioned, perhaps some preference of using one economic instrument, and you highlighted the price on pollution. And you saw that maybe as perhaps the best way of leading to some of these, fuel switching to lower carbon fuels. And I'm wondering, in your analysis, what level do we need to see in terms per ton on greenhouse gases to start encouraging some of that price switching that you'd like to see in the market?
Any price that you put in place will establish a threshold so that the market then has an incentive to find the emission reductions that cost less than that amount per ton. We would expect that already at the $20 to $30 range, we will be seeing the market working to find those. But in the case of motor fuels, demand elasticities are very low. Demand is very resilient. And so in that case, it's possible to calculate, I believe the number would be about $230 or $240 a ton is what we would need as a carbon price to hit Paris targets. But a better question would be at that point, what's an appropriate price per ton as far as the estimated social damages go? And that may not be consistent with specific targets like net zero and Paris.
Thank you. Well, next question I'd like to ask Monsieur Masselot. I understand, I think earlier this year, you inaugurated the largest proton exchange membrane electrolyzer in Quebec. And I'm curious, what made you decide to open this facility in Quebec relative to some of the other areas around the world where you do work?
Sure. Two or three reasons for that. First of all, when we are looking at the technology provider, it's the company Cummins, ex-Hydrogenics, based in Mississauga, where Air Liquide has a 19% something shareholding. So Canadian technology, Canadian project in terms of investment. For sure, abundance of relatively non-intermittent, and insist non-intermittent green energy through Hydro-Québec, helpful. price of megawatt, which is helping. Subsidies we had from the Minister of Finance of Quebec as well. Location, very well positioned for the Northeast Corridor, and why not later on the Canada Highway, Windsor, Toronto, and more. And last but not least, and important for us, it's a location where we have strong technical capabilities linked with the University of Quebec in Trois-Rivières. We have a PhD working for us in this location. So we have skills, and we already had utilities in this location. We are already producing and liquefying hydrogen. So we are back to this notion of basin, scale up, and making sure we have anchor customers. We had anchor customers making this project viable and alive.
Thank you. Well, next question I'd like to ask to Mr. Thompson. In your opening, you mentioned in terms of, we had two main recommendations. In your second recommendation, you're talking about when you're looking at the life cycle emissions, you want to make sure that in Canada, we're going to be consistent with some of the North American standards. And so I was hoping you could expand a little bit on that point.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Weiler. It's really very simple. Of the 100% of emissions coming out of a car, 75% of those come from the crude oil, and you pull it out of the ground, you process it, and you burn it. There's nothing you can do to take that fact away. You can reduce the carbon intensity of the way that you manufacture those fuels, but that you can never take them to zero that way. The European Union said in its comparable regulation, the Renewable Energy Directive, it said to obligated parties, said, look, you can do pretty much anything you want, but the credits you generate and the actions you take need to be proportionate to the life cycle, because if we're going to fundamentally take all of the carbon or most of the carbon out of transportation, you can't focus just on the 25, you've got to work on the 75, where you've got, as my comment, advanced biofuels, hydrogen, low carbon hydrogen, renewable natural gas, electricity, all of those things. Those have to be part of it. So the Europeans quite literally said, you have to deliver your credits in proportion to those proportions. And in Canada, it's 75-25.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Weiler.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Simard, over to you for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, James.
Thank you, James. A question for Professor McKittrick. Can you hear me well? Is the interpretation working? Yes? Okay. You spoke earlier about the price of pollution, price of carbon. In your presentation, you talked about a study that you did from 2008 to 2012 on ethanol. And I'm wondering, I don't know if you've got numbers handy, but I would say that if I do a quick review, the oil and gas industry had benefited from financial support from the federal government of about $24 billion from 2017 to 2020. And when studying the credits from the Department of Natural Resources recently, we saw that there was another $500 or $600 million just for 2021-2022 to bring down emissions. Knowing that the oil and gas sector benefits significantly from federal government support, do you not believe that we should change our strategy if we want to bring down GHGs?
Study more recently on the definitions used for subsidies for calculating the kinds of numbers that you refer to. And I would need to see more detail. The input-output tables use one type of definition, but other times people group in ordinary tax write-offs and things like that. So as a general matter, though, I don't support subsidies for oil and gas. I know the federal government put a lot of money into subsidizing the Hibernia oil platform in Newfoundland, and I believe continues to plan to support that platform. What you want is a neutral playing field for all the energy sectors. So the costs, though, of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we don't calculate them by looking at subsidies to sectors. They're calculated using economic modeling strategies that look at who bears the cost throughout society, including the increased price of energy that propagates throughout the entire economy.
Thanks. I'm going to have to stop you there, Mr. Simard. Over to you, Mr. Cannings.
Well, thank you. And I'm just going to continue with Mr. Lewis where we left off. Just he mentioned this new plant in Long Beach, California. 25,000 barrels per day, I guess, is the target for that plant. What I'd like to know in terms of the scale up is, I know there's a lot of French fries produced every day in North America, but what is the capacity there for a feedstock to produce biodiesel from these sources in relation to the overall diesel market in North America? Is that is that possible, or where does that lie? I mean, I can see that you could have one plant in California. What does that scale up look like? Is it truly?
It's actually quite amazing. What we're seeing right now is a significant expansion in the number of new facilities that are being built, and the majority of them are being built by oil and gas companies that are pursuing more and more becoming producers of renewable fuels as well. So whether it's Marathon or Phillips 66, Valero. They all have their own renewable diesel facilities. We are actually an independent, a merchant refiner, if you will, but it is becoming more and more part of the integrated supply chain that gets blended with petroleum diesel and with biodiesel as well. And so right now, the places where these products are going are to the jurisdictions that are looking to have policies to reduce carbon the most. And it really is about a carbon reduction that is carrying the weight and driving the investment. So that market will be created. And the greatest interest, I mean, as we know that there's several majors that are looking to become, net zero emission petroleum companies or energy companies by 2040 and 2050. So we've seen significant drive around the globe to make more, to build more and more of these facilities. Neste is the Finnish oil company, which is the largest producer of renewable diesel around the world. And so this industry, this is really about Canada carving out that the demand or the supply, should be built here by ensuring that the demand is going to be here, through policy. And I also think.
Can I just interrupt? Yes. Sorry, I just want to get
5 seconds left.
I just want to make sure that the feedstock, the cooking oils, whatever, will be there to match the overall need for diesel that we have today. Can that be 100%?
It will not be 100%. No, but it will be. It's a feathering in of a variety of different solutions to overall mitigate the amount of carbon that's being emitted through our existing infrastructure today.
Thank you. Okay, over to Mr. Lloyd for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. I guess my first line of question will be for our renewable fuels folks, maybe Mr. Lewis or whoever feels competent to answer the question. I'm reading with a great deal of concern about, Buy America provisions and more protectionism from our biggest trading partner in the area of, canola, which we know is a major feedstock for biofuels. I'm wondering if you could give this committee the lay of the land, like what is going on with the industry in regards to protectionism? What is the threat to our industry, and how is this going to impact the development of biofuels in Canada?
Scott, do you want to take that?
Sure. I think that right now, these products are moving quite freely, and protectionist policies throughout the different jurisdictions. And the only thing that's really happening with these protectionist policies is that you're changing trade flows. So it is the same amount of product that is going into the various sectors, but it is being displaced so that trade flows are being moved, but so far we haven't seen that as being detrimental to our industry. Certainly, we're seeing excessive demand as we come out of COVID for certain feedstocks. It's not being driven so much by biofuels as it is overall demand from other sectors, including food and other things like that. But it's amazing how the agricultural and waste industries are also expanding to meet those demands.
Do you think that if you're forecasting into the future with the best information you have at hand, do you think that Canada will continue to have fairly easy access in terms of, developing an integrated biofuel supply chain with the United States? Or do you think that's an area of some risk? What are the risks, and what can the Canadian government do to ensure that stays open?
No, I think that primarily we have to rely on this as an evolving and adaptive industry in itself. And so new feedstocks that we need clear policy to denote what the industry needs to do. And therefore, new feedstocks, whether it's cover crops or algae or a variety of other type of solutions, can come on board because we know that the demand is going to be there. So we are very active in pursuing a variety of new feedstocks. We do not see that market as static. We see that it has the ability to increase and to meet the needs of the policies that are put in. But we need clear direction from government on policy to let us know that these are safe places to invest.
My next question, Canada's quite a cold country. We have very volatile weather, and some people have brought up the concern about cloud point, and like if you're raising the biofuel requirements, how is this going to impact the cloud point? Are there any changes we need to make in terms of how our engines are made to address that issue?
No, we certainly see with renewable diesel that it doesn't have any cloud point issues. We're able to be blended with petroleum or to be used, as a straight our renewable diesel 100 in diesel engines, and we're able to meet the cloud points as required. So we have all the way down when we make sustainable aviation fuel that has a cloud point of minus 55. So when you have renewable diesel, it's just different cuts that you can put. You can make boutique blends for boutique regions.
And there are no cloud point issues associated with ethanol.
Excellent. How much time do I have left, Mr. Chair?
You've got just under a minute and a half.
Okay. Maybe my quick question for Air Liquide. You're investing a lot in, what are some of the things you're looking for Canada to make investment in your industry? Like when you're making an investment in a country, what are you looking for?
Begin with looking at the relatively capital-intensive activity we have. We are looking at stability. When our decision is to make such an investment, it's not for the upcoming 10 years. It's for
what would cause instability? What would cause instability in
By
Canada?
Stability, we have overall, let's say, a political and a relatively economical stability in Canada. But when we're speaking about stability, it's stability in terms of rules. When I'm making an investment today, I'm not looking specifically at carbon price today. I'm looking at what I expect carbon price to be in 10 years, 15 years and more. Same thing in terms of water constraints and more. So that's typically things we are currently looking at and dealing with when we are bringing up to our, let's say, stage-gated investment validation process. It's not only a financial elements, it's as well making sure that what we invest today will be sustained and in the market in 15, 20 years period of time.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Right on time, as you can hear. On to Mr. May now for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wanted to, first of all, thank all of the witnesses for being here today. This has been a fascinating study, and today is no exception. Before I ask my question, though, I think I have to jump in on one of the comments previously, specifically Mr. Zimmer bringing up Ontario and the cost of the transition. The cost is incredibly important, but I think it's important to get on the record the cost of inaction and the fact that we have here in Ontario now one of the greenest grids on the planet, zero emission, zero smog days in places like Toronto, and of course a whole lot fewer kids in our schools having to carry puffers at school. I'm a firm believer that if you want shade today, you should have planted the tree 30 years ago. And I think this is the challenge that we have in front of us is what do we do now in order to be prepared for our future. Mr. McKittrick.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Zimmer, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I just would like to clarify. I was very specific in saying I care about the environment, but we don't want to bankrupt the country to do it. Thanks.
Okay.
It's not a point of order, Mr. Chair, and I hope that doesn't take away from my time.
It won't. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, who's that now, Mr. McLean?
Sorry, Mr. May said something there that I've never heard before about there being fewer puffers in school now. I was wondering if you could, for this sake of this committee, if you could table that information for us as well.
Well, I'm not a witness on this panel, but I think we can definitely have that conversation offline. If I can get back to my questions, that would be great. Please. My question is for Mr. McKittrick. You talked a little bit about the idea of carbon leakage in one of your answers, and I'm wondering, sir, if you can maybe talk about that a little bit more. And I'm concerned that the idea that we should be waiting to see what countries like China or the United States do before we set environmental policy. I'm wondering if that's what you're suggesting.
We don't have to wait and see what China or India or even the United States are doing. We can see not only is China building its coal-fired plant capacity, they have enough planned and on the books to exceed the current coal-fired power plant capacity in the United States just with the additional increment. They are also
sir,
investing.
Is it your belief then that we should not have gotten rid of coal in Ontario?
Let me go back to that point. You said we don't have smog days. I don't know if you're asserting that's because we phased out the coal-fired power plants, but the province's own analysis of that showed that the coal-fired power plants contributed less than 1% of the particulate and smog pollution. They like to promote this idea that Lambton and Nanticoke were the causes of those smog days. But if you look on the Ontario Ministry of Environment website,
I got really limited time. I had a very specific yes/no question. Do you think we should have eliminated the coal plants in Ontario?
No, I think we should have continued the retrofit on them, which was underway at that time, that would have eliminated most of the air pollution from them.
You also bring up the idea of regulations not contributing to advancements. I was a little bit surprised by that, given, frankly, what we've seen over the last 5 years, especially in industries like the auto industry, the complete transition in the auto industry, moving towards electrification. Can you maybe cite some research you're talking about that connects those two things, that the regulations don't, in fact, contribute to the advancement of technology?
What I said was that if you're going to use carbon pricing, you should let the pricing mechanism do the work of picking the most cost-effective strategy. If you put a carbon price in place, and then you also add in a lot of regulations where you then try to direct industry over and above the carbon price, you're undermining the economics of the carbon pricing system.
Thank you, sir. Over quickly, because I know my time is limited to Mr. Masselot. We just had an announcement this morning of $1.5 billion from the minister with regard to a hydrogen strategy. Do you believe that's going to increase the probability of advancement in that technology?
I think it will. To a large extent, when we are looking at other countries, let's take Europe, 9 billion euro in Germany, 7 in France, just to give you a few examples. It's important because it's a question as well of maturity of technologies. And when you're looking at all technologies, there's this, let's say, gap you need to close. And one way to do it very clearly is through help of government, through subsidies, to bring technologies at par.
Thank you very much, sir. I think that's my time, sir.
It is, yeah. Thank you, Mr. May. Okay, members, it's 12:27. The agenda says we're stopping at 12:30. We just finished a round. I propose we go a little bit longer. We're going into another 5-minute round. What I propose to do, absent any objection, is give one member from each party one question, which will take us probably to about 25 or 22.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Zimmer. Okay, so Mr. Patzer, that would be your turn.
Well, thank you very much. I just figure out which direction I want to go here with one question. That No,
it's a lot of pressure. I apologize.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good, though. I appreciate the opportunity to still be able to engage with the witnesses here. I guess the direction I'm going to go is back to the cost, and that. So, Mr. McKittrick, you had talked, and you'd elaborate a little bit on the $6 for every dollar of benefit, but you also said $440 per person per year, just on the clean fuel standard alone that this government is implementing. We had a witness last week who said that, because you have one policy that's disproportionately impacting rural and remote Canadians, seniors living on a fixed income, single mothers as well, but that you should also have an offsetting policy in a different area of government to kind of help make up the difference or make up the gap. Is that some of the problems that you've talked about with policy when you have to have multiple policies to offset other bad policies? Is that kind of what you were alluding to there?
That particular number referred to the total macroeconomic cost of the clean fuel standard. And to understand that, I would refer you to the discussion earlier about whether the feedstock would be available for the expansion of biodiesel. If you're going to get more feedstock, you have to take it out of the food supply or somehow find a way of expanding the production of the feedstock. It's those second order costs that really add up and that affect people, especially if you're raising both the price of energy and the price of food. Those costs disproportionately fall on low income households. You can then propose Band-Aid solutions, but they never quite are adequate. Look at what Ontario's doing, trying to transfer the cost now of the renewable energy contracts onto the taxpayer. The C.D. Howe Institute has estimated we're now spending more for those subsidies than we spend on our entire long-term care budget in Ontario. So Band-Aid solutions down the roads still don't get away from the fact that there are costs and they have to be paid by someone.
Thanks, Mr. Patzer. Mr. Lefebvre, over to you for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think this may be my last question in the committee as a parliamentarian. So I want to certainly as well thank all of you, my colleagues from all sides of the House of the aisle, and certainly you, Mr. Chair, and the great team, the analysts. It's been an amazing run. Your team of analysts across has just been amazing, as well as the people that take care of the committees. C'est un énorme plaisir et un grand privilège.
It was an enormous pleasure for me.
Very quickly to Mr. Thompson and Mr. Lewis, I want to talk about the job opportunities here. Certainly, as we're looking at biofuels, and certainly as we're looking at this transition, we all know, we've heard from many witnesses, a lot of scientists anyways, that it needs to happen. And a lot of, obviously, companies and a lot of businesses that are going down that path. So I want to talk to you. I want to very quickly, the economic opportunities and the job opportunities in this sector. How do you see it? Mr. Thompson and then Mr. Lewis, very quickly.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And thank you for your long years of public service. And I hope you enjoy your retirement, quote unquote. We will provide to the committee, in fact, we might have already done it in our briefing notes. The data that we have done on our website, you'll find an analysis from late last year, from which is the source that I use to quote my sources. I can give you an example. In British Columbia, we've had a low carbon fuel standard since mid-2013. In the last 12 to 18 months, we've had about $500 to $700 million of investments into the energy space here from companies in the forestry sector, refiners, and others. And those are very directly tied to the British Columbia low carbon fuel standard, which now has sent this very effective signal to the industry to build out. So we're very clear in British Columbia, we've seen it and we expect, and our studies are indicating there's similar kind of effect in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre.
I had, Mr. Chair, I had Mr. Lewis very quickly for an answer. I had both of them very quickly.
Right.
You're on mute, Mr. Lewis. Sorry.
Beg your pardon. We just are finishing an economic analysis for the plant that we're doing, the expansion conversion plant that we're doing of an existing refinery down in Long Beach, and we were amazed. There was over from this project, which is certainly our investment is over $1 billion ourselves, and it was generating over $18 billion of add-on economic activity with the amount of jobs. It's a 4-year project to build. We employ currently over 150 people there that would not have their jobs if it had been left as a petroleum refinery, because it was no longer viable in that form. And yet, with the environmental concerns as a result of the fact that it was a refinery for 100 years, it would have effectively been scorched earth. And so, be able to rejuvenate that its place within the community is huge. This is down in the U.S. now. The average value of a job there was over $85,000. This is U.S. dollars, so this is real, but it's in the U.S. And because these are high-paying jobs in the sector, and so I don't have the specific numbers for Canada right now, but I can say that they are exceptional at the project that we're doing in the States, and we expect that you're going to see similar values, numbers, and scope, and up here in Canada with the right policies in place to stimulate the investment.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Samard.
Oui, merci, James.
Thank you, James. It's my turn? Great. I don't want to look ungrateful. I did want to recognize you all in camera, but I do have a question for Mr. Maslow. I was wondering, in your Bécancour project, did you have the support of the federal government? And I'd like to know, as to the hydrogen question and the federal government strategy, in your opinion, what needs to be put in place in the short and medium term? Thank you. Well, as for the investment, the support we got was from the provincial government. It was for the megawatts in one part, and then there was also support from the Department of Finances of Quebec. What's important to us, we need to generate demand. And in this case, I believe that with policies that are credible and voluntary based, we can focus on basins of clients and industries that are big enough that the use of hydrogen for mobility, we want it to be sufficiently significant so it's no longer a question of demonstration. We're not there anymore. We know that the technology exists and works, so now we have to dream big relatively. And along the entire chain of hydrogen, we have to see how it can be used across the country, not just for mobility, but also for decarbonizing all aspects of industry.
Question to Mr. Cannings.
Well, thank you. And I'll go back to Mr. Lewis again, just because while I can appreciate, that we need to use, every tool we can to decarbonize our economy, I just want to try to establish, what are the limits of biodiesel, for instance, in doing that, because we have to get to net zero by 2050. And and maybe this doesn't involve biodiesel, obviously, but you mentioned aviation fuel, that the supplies were low. I've heard some very concerning things about, the acreage of canola needed if we were producing aviation fuel from canola, for instance, for every flight, across the Atlantic or Pacific. So what is the limits on that in terms of the feedstock, in terms of how much we would be able to use of that, by 2030 or by 2050? What's the contribution that biofuels can make there?
Well, I think it's significant in terms, of course, the straight carbon reduction and the demand from the industry itself. It is looking. United Airlines is one of our customers. It has announced that it's going to be a zero emission company by 2040, which is it's a challenge when what you do is fly planes. And so one of the ways that they're doing that is engaging with us. We've been supplying them with sustainable aviation fuel out of our California facility since 2016. We currently use animal fats and recovered vegetable oils. We haven't even looked into taking food crops there because of where it's located, and of course using these second-use products out of a very heavily populated area. That is one of the sectors that is growing. We've actually recently committed another board that I'm on down in the Advanced Biofuels Association to do a feedstock study for just this purposes, to look at it in the whole in the greater scope. I can say that it isn't just about existing crops, because those are going to be very important, but I think that new technologies with algae, with camelina, with cover crops, that's where the expansion is going to come. And right now, that's where the primary value is going to be created, is by putting them into biofuels. They're not going to be done without having these policy indicators to allow us to expand. So we're not just looking at the food for fuel debate. We're looking at where can we get lipids on a massive scale. So it can be certainly all of these feedstocks are a piece of the puzzle, a part of the layer. But I think that you can go to. We will continually be searching to go to the lowest carbon feedstock that we can, and generate some very high yields in very small areas with the new crops and lipid-based oils that are available.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mr. Cannings. Okay, that takes us to the end of our final meeting on a very interesting study. We're going to go on camera, but before we do that, I just want to say thank you to our witnesses today. We've had several amazing panels, and today was no exception. Your contribution is much appreciated, and it's a great way to cap off the study. And the last thing I want to say is this probably will be Mr. Lefebvre's last meeting in this committee. I mean, over the summer, we don't know what's going to happen, but regardless, committee membership could change. I really hope I see you in September. But I know, speaking on behalf of the committee, you've been an outstanding colleague. You've added so much to this committee. Personally, you've made my experience as an MP much better. I've learned far, far, far more from you than you could ever learn from me. And for that alone, I'm very grateful, and you are really going to be missed. So, Mr. Lefebvre, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, on this side of the House, I echo that. Mr. Lefebvre has been an excellent colleague and always a joy to come to this committee because of his participation in it, his gentlemanliness, and his general respect for all of us around the table. Mr. Lefebvre, you will be missed. Thank you.
Je vais faire un peu la même chose.
I'd like to do the same thing. Paul, I think it was my first experience in committee, and I think I couldn't have had a more friendly and enjoyable colleague. So I'm very happy to have worked with you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much, Mario. Thank you, everyone.
And I'll chip in, obviously, too, to say my best wishes to Paul. I actually hope we'll see you back in the fall, because I'm hoping that's the way things go. Maybe not on this committee, but in Parliament in some form. But if not, best wishes, and come out to the Okanagan. We can have a glass of wine on the patio.
Sounds good. Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
That sounds like a perfect way to adjourn our the public portion of our final meeting on this topic and of this session. So thank you all, and I will see committee members in camera momentarily.
Thank you very much.
Bye.